Oh boy, do I have an infuriating piece of news for you. So guess what, y'all? We learned about who won the Pulitzer. And get ready to pull your hair out. Get ready to pull your hair out. This is going to drive you crazy, man. Your blood is going to boil when you hear this. The New York Times has won a Pulitzer Prize in international reporting. Okay, now by the way, you want to know what they didn't submit when it came to their international reporting stories? What's it called? Screams Without Words? The one about the mass rape that happened in Israel? They didn't submit that. You want to know why? Because that reporting has been ripped to shreds 17 ways to Sunday because it's not true. They were pushing a narrative. It was a false narrative. A million holes have now been poked in that. And they realize, hey, we can't submit this because it's shitty fucking reporting. It's just propaganda. It's just war propaganda. It's just lies. Okay, so that's the first point. They laid the groundwork for the propaganda that led to the complete obliteration of Gaza and the murdering of 15,000 kids there. But they get an award for how good they are at international reporting. Okay, but it's worse than that. It's worse than that. They're getting a Pulitzer for international reporting. Do you guys remember this? Leaked New York Times Gaza memo tells journalists to avoid words genocide, ethnic cleansing, and occupied territory. Amid the internal battle over the New York Times coverage of Israel's war, top editors handed down a set of directives. The New York Times instructed journalists covering Israel's war on the Gaza Strip to restrict the use of terms genocide and ethnic cleansing and to avoid phrases like occupied territory when describing Palestinian land, according to a copy of an internal memo obtained by The Intercept. The memo also instructs reporters not to use the word Palestine, except in very rare cases, and to steer clear of the term refugee camps to describe areas of Gaza historically settled by displaced Palestinians expelled from other parts of Palestine during previous Israeli-Arab wars. The areas are recognized by the UN as refugee camps and house hundreds of thousands of registered refugees. The memo, written by Times Standards editor Susan Wessling, international editor Philip Pan, and their deputies, offers guidance about some terms and other issues we have grappled with since the start of the conflict in October. While the document is presented as an outline for maintaining objective journalistic principles in reporting on the Gaza war, several Times staffers told The Intercept that some of its contents show evidence of the paper's deference to Israeli narratives. Quote, I think it's the kind of thing that looks professional and logical if you have no knowledge of the historical context of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, said a Times newsroom source who requested anonymity for fear of reprisal of the Gaza memo. But if you do know, it will be clear how apologetic it is to Israel. So in other words, let me put this in layman's terms for you. A directive from the top of the New York Times came down and told all the journalists, hey, we are forcing you to lie on behalf of Israel. Now look, you want to have a debate around the terms genocide and ethnic cleansing. I don't think that's a reasonable debate anymore. I think the jury's in. I think it is a genocide, and I think it is an ethnic cleansing. But for argument's sake, let's say people still want to debate that. Okay. Where's the debate around occupied territory? Where's the debate around refugee camp? Where's the debate around Palestinian territories? There is no fucking debate. This is a directive to lie on behalf of Israel. By the way, if you're saying you can't mention genocide and ethnic cleansing, okay. Right now we have 42,000 Palestinians dead, 38,000 of them civilians. What if it was 100,000? What if it was 500,000? What if it was 1 million? Would you still say, don't say genocide, don't say ethnic cleansing? Israel announced we're doing a total medieval siege, so no food, no fuel, no water for 2.3 million people, and also we are forcing people to relocate. If you're in North Gaza, you gotta go south. We're forcing you to move. If that's not ethnic cleansing, what the fuck is an ethnic cleansing? What is an ethnic cleansing? This was a directive. This was a memo from the top. We are forcing you to lie on behalf of Israel. This is journalistic malpractice of the highest order. You're not even allowed to say occupied territories? This is not even in the realm of debate. We know what a refugee camp is. We know what the occupied territories are. Every human rights organization under the sun, every news outlet acknowledges these basic facts of reality. You are bending over backwards to lie on behalf of a genocidal far right-wing government led by Benjamin Netanyahu. And they won a Pulitzer. They won a Pulitzer. My ass cheeks. If they won a Pulitzer, motherfucker, we should be winning the NBA championship and the Stanley Cup and the Pulitzer and the Nobel Prize on this show for what we do here. Getting a Pulitzer after it's been proven you're fucking liars. More. Coverage of Gaza war in New York Times and other major newspapers heavily favored Israel, analysis shows. A quantitative analysis shows major newspapers skewed their coverage toward Israeli narratives in the first 6 weeks of the assault on Gaza. Shout out to Adam Johnson and Ahmed Ali. Guys, we broke this down in detail for you when this first came out. So look at this. Mentions of Palestinians declined as the death toll mounted. Let me repeat that. Mentions of Palestinians declined as the death toll mounted. In other words, when October 7th happened, and you can paint the Palestinians as the perpetrators and Israelis as the victims, talk about Palestinians all over the place and framing them as perpetrators. When the bodies of dead kids and dead women and dead civilians started piling up in Gaza, all of a sudden, nobody's talking about Palestinians anymore. Nobody's saying, hey, these people are victims. Look at the chart. Look at the chart. Look at the chart. All right, I got more for you. A word like slaughter is used for Israelis. If they get killed, it's not used for Palestinians. Slaughter of Israelis, not Palestinians. The terms slaughter, massacre, and horrific were disproportionately used to describe Israeli deaths. So here's the New York Times. 22-1. 22-1. 22 times Israeli victims were called, it was said they were slaughtered. 1 time for Palestinians. Jesus Christ, man. Use of the word horrific. 11 times when it's Israeli victims, 1 time when it's Palestinian victims. Use of the word massacre. 53 times when it's Israeli victims, 1 time when it's Palestinian victims. You know how many hospitals and schools and mosques and churches and clinics and factories and homes were bombed on purpose? They uncovered a program called Daddy's Home, where they purposely waited for low-level Hamas operatives to go home, knowing there are women and children there, and then they bomb the women and children with the Hamas operative, and they act like this is a perfectly legitimate thing to do. Were they saying massacre for that? When you'd get 6 civilians to 1 bad guy? Would they say massacre? So now we have absolute proof that the New York Times lied on behalf of Israel. Don't say genocide, don't say ethnic cleansing, don't say occupied territory, don't say Palestine except in very rare circumstances, don't say refugee camp. In other words, lie, 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 lie. It's a war on objective reality, hilariously as they try to argue we're upholding objective journalistic standards. And then we also know the immense bias in how everything's covered. If you just read the New York Times, you would walk away thinking that there are 42,000 Israeli civilians who've been killed. You would walk away thinking more than half of the buildings in Israel have been destroyed, as opposed to the reality. 42,000 Palestinians killed, more than half the buildings in Gaza destroyed, every sort of civilian infrastructure hit, total medieval siege, cutting off food, fuel, and water to 2.3 million people, stopping the food for civilians from getting in. You would have a totally skewed perception of what's happening if you just read the New York Times. And they won a fucking Pulitzer, bro. A fucking Pulitzer. Look, I think it's time to declare now all of our institutions are broken beyond repair. Guys, this is exactly what we saw in the buildup to the Iraq War. All the major newspapers with all the credibility, lie, 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 lie. Fed bullshit from Dick Cheney or some lackey within the Bush administration. The newspapers run it uncritically, build up the war propaganda. We saw it then, we're seeing it now. In every moment of consequence, our institutions drastically fail us. And then they'll have the nerve in 10 years from now to all pretend like they were on the right side of this. They'll have the nerve 10 years from now to be like, well, of course, the Iraq War was a bad war. Of course, the Vietnam War was a bad war. Of course, Israel committed a genocide against Palestinians and that was wrong. Where are you when it counts? Where are you in the moment when you have the power to try to help stop it? You're doing Netanyahu's propaganda. That's what the fuck you're doing. And you're winning awards for it. What a disgusting, decrepit, broken, rotten-ass system where these motherfuckers win a Pulitzer. Are you kidding me? I deserve a Pulitzer more than they deserve a Pulitzer. And I don't deserve dick. But I certainly deserve it more than they do. These are objective failures. Objective failures. And what do? They fillet themselves as they make their biggest fuck-ups. Talk about smug, talk about condescending, talk about arrogant and self-satisfied. I've never seen anything worse than this. Imagine in the midst of Judith Miller reporting lies to get us into Iraq. At the same time, They're winning awards for it. By the way, they may have. I don't even remember. Maybe they did. You're not heroes. You're not the vanguards of the truth. This isn't even real journalism. It's not even real journalism. There's more real journalism from people like Jordan Chariton or Ken Klippenstein or Ryan Grimm. There's more journalism in their fucking pinky fingers than there is at all the New York Times. There's more journalism in a fart from one of those guys than there is at the New York Times. This fucking grotesque, biased bullshit. We all see through it. Everybody's mocking you. Everybody's laughing at you. Everybody who follows this stuff closely. You're not going to continue to lie us into more war, more genocides, more arming of absolute psychopaths, and then get to pat yourself on the back for it like you're some sort of fucking hero. Spare me. Spare me. Pulitzer my ass cheeks. They should light that thing on fire. Flush it down the toilet. They should go hand it to the families in Palestine who have loved ones who've been killed because of your fucking misreporting that helped lead to more arms and money going to these psychopaths. Oh, by the way, I forgot one more thing here. This is really interesting. So, Pulitzer trying to cover their ass a little bit. They're like, okay, they know what they're doing. They know the New York Times had fucking wrote horrible stories and was terribly biased, and they gave them the Pulitzer anyway, right? But we got to cover our ass a little bit. So what do? They give journalists and media workers covering the war in Gaza. They give a shout out to them. This is the 2024 Pulitzer Prize winner in special citations and awards. So they shout out the journalists and the media workers covering the war in Gaza. Okay. So there's now over 140 journalists who've been killed. Let me rephrase that. There's more than 140 journalists who have been murdered by Israel on purpose because they're exposing Israeli war crimes on the ground. These are the real heroes. These are the real people who should win a fucking Pulitzer, right? Okay. Look at what they say about them. In recent years, the Pulitzer Board has issued citations honoring journalists covering wars in Ukraine and Afghanistan. This year, the board recognized the courageous work of journalists and media workers covering the war in Gaza. Under horrific conditions, an extraordinary number of journalists have died, very passive, in the effort to tell the stories of Palestinians and others in Gaza. This war has also claimed the lives of poets and writers among the casualties. Claimed the lives as the Pulitzer Prizes honor categories of journalism, arts, and letters. We mark the loss of invaluable records of the human experience. So in other words, I'm not going to name a single one of the journalists who was murdered by Israel on purpose. I'm not going to name Rafat Al-Arir, the poet, who was murdered by Israel on purpose. I'm not going to name them. So they don't name anybody, and the language is passive. They died in this circumstance. They died. Passive language. Ready? Now look at what they wrote about Ukraine. The journalists of Ukraine. The Pulitzer Board awards a special citation to the journalists of Ukraine for their courage, endurance, and commitment to truthful reporting during Vladimir Putin's ruthless invasion of their country and his propaganda war in Russia. Despite bombardment, abductions, occupation, and even deaths in their ranks, they have persisted in their effort to provide an accurate picture of a terrible reality, doing honor to Ukraine and to journalists around the world. So when it's talking about Russia and Ukraine, you see the wording. Vladimir Putin's ruthless invasion of their country and propaganda. When it's Israel murdering over 140 journalists on purpose, it's they died. They passed away, maybe of natural causes or something. Neutral language, not emotive, not assigning blame, not direct. Look at the difference, man. What a sick joke. What a sick joke. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.